Okay, so we're going to learn skinning today. And, well, the first thing the skinning, let me describe that first. The skinning is the information that is passed between the joints and the mesh to get the mesh to follow the joints. And there's some fall off between joints where, a certain position of the certain section of the skin is controlled by multiple joints. For instance, the forearm, elbow area in this region, the skin that's right in the center here, or the cloth, in this case she's wearing a coat, is going to be controlled by the upper arm or shoulder joint and the lower arm joint. So we can create a crease. Okay. Now, the first things first, we want to select all the joints in our hierarchy that we want to use for skinning. Well, that's every joint except for the tip joints. Okay, so I've got this is a tip joint, but I'm going to use it. Okay, because this one would normally have a tip joint at the top of the head, so that it could orient to that, which I showed you guys in the previous tutorial. So I'm going to select all these joints here, and then I need the clavicle, shoulder, elbow, wrist, but I don't need the hand joint, at least not yet. Yeah, I don't really need the hand joint. I do need the hip, knee, and ankle and ball, but I don't need the toe. And the same thing for the other leg. Okay, now I'm going to rename these. Right now they say whatever their name is, underscore joint. So the fast way to rename them is go to Modify, Search and Replace Names. And I'm going to search for underscore joint and replace with underscore bind. So just click the apply. And now they've all been renamed. Okay, now that's important because that's an indicator to me as the creator that which joints I are going to control the mesh and which ones are not. Okay. Also, it's nice is if you're wanting to control the mesh, select all these joints, then you can type in a little command in the command line called select space open double quotes, close double quotes, and then inside of that you want to type a star bind. And then if you press enter, it's going to select every object in your entire scene that has in its name the word bind. So that's pretty nice, helpful. Okay, so now to do the actual skinning, because my character is made up of multiple meshes, I'm just going to select one mesh at a time and select the appropriate joints that should affect that mesh. Okay, and this is going to save me some work later on. So for the coat or her sweater, all these joints, the hips all the way up the spine to the head, are going to affect it. The clavicle and down to the wrist on each arm is going to affect it. And the hips, looks like they need to affect it a little bit. So I've selected all those. Then I'll shift select the sweater itself. I'm going to go to the skinning menu, smooth bind, option box. Let me reset this to defaults. So your bind to method, you want to choose selected joints because we want to control what happens here. You could tell it to do the joint hierarchy, in which case you would be able to select the root joint or the hips joint in our case, and then it would use all of its children joints to affect the mesh, but we don't want that. Okay, our bind method is closest distance. Our skinning method will use classic linear. We want to normalize weights interactively. I'm going to not explain each of these in detail. That's for the next class in animation. Your weight distribution will be based off of distance. And allow multiple bind poses. Let's not. Number of max influences, I'm going to change this down to 1. Maintain max influences, we're going to turn that off. And I don't like my skeleton to be colorized. This has no bearing on how successful this is. It's just going to color the joints. Yeah, if you feel like you want colored joints, then you can figure out what that is. I think it's annoying. Remove unused influences. No, we're going to leave those selected because we know now the influences that it's talking about are our joints. So we know we have all the joints selected that we need to affect this mesh. So we'll leave that checked. Our drop-off distance. Well, this is a measure of Maya units. So right now, if you look at our grid, this is 1 centimeter or 1 unit. And so the weighting of these things is going to drop off over a distance of 4 units. So that would be pretty much from the center of her body all the way out to her fingertips. So that's a little excessive. And it's not really going to matter anyway because we've only allowed 1 influence object per vertice. Now a lot of this may not make sense yet, but it will eventually. So I'm going to turn this down though to 1. Press enter to confirm that value, and then I'm going to click apply. Now what happened is this mesh now has a piece of history called the skin cluster. And the skin cluster, because we have multiple meshes, we're going to end up with multiple skin clusters, 1 per mesh. And so what we need to do is name each one appropriately. So sweater underscore skin cluster. Okay. Now the backpack was parented to the sweater, so it went ahead and did skinning to that as well. So we'll rename that to backpack. Skin cluster, and then we've got this little tassel right here. Okay. So I've got 3 of the objects that now have skinning information. Now let's do a hand. This is the left hand. It's helpful that I've named everything appropriately so I know exactly what I'm working with here. So I need to go to the left hand joints, and I just need the elbow and the wrist joint only. So with the same settings, I'll click apply. Do the same thing to this side. Apply. I'm going to go and rename these real quick. Hand left skin cluster, and we got hand right skin cluster. Okay. I'm going to come down to the legs and the skirt. So the skirt, let's do that first, is going to be controlled by the hips. So I'll select the hips. And then if I want to collapse this hierarchy, because I know I don't need this torso, I can double click that and it just all rolls up into itself. And that little red arrow just means there's more hierarchy to be listed. So I can double click that and open it up. Or I could right click on this and say expand all, and it's all back. Anyway, it's kind of a shortcut. So we need the hips joint, we need the hip left and hip right joint. Then we're going to grab the skirt, click bind or apply. Okay, and then we got the left leg, and then we need the left hip and knee. We'll click apply. Right leg, right hip and knee, apply. Let's go ahead and rename these. So this is left leg, leg underscore left underscore leg underscore R underscore and skirt. Okay. Then we've got boots. So we've got the boot and we need the knee, ankle, the ball. Click apply. Rename that. Okay. I'll click apply on that one. Okay, you can see how this might be important because over here, when I have a joint selected, it lists all the skin clusters that it's giving information to. So it's outputs. Okay, so it's kind of nice to know, be able to know that. Okay, there's only one left. That's on the face. This may or may not crash Maya, so let me save real quick. This mesh is not intended to be rigged, just so you know. I have to do some retopology on it. This is straight out of ZBrush. Okay, so right now the only joint that needs to affect the face or the head is the head base joint. So we've got the head base, that mesh, we'll click apply. You can see how much longer that's going to take. If it didn't die, that's good news. So we'll rename that to head underscore skin cluster. Okay, so now everything is bound. And if everything is bound like we think it is, we can select our root joint or hips joint, which is called hips underscore bind. Go to our move tool, and my character is going to move. And because I have IK on that leg, it's already going to be that leg's going to be doing some bending and stuff. Now this is kind of good that it did that. So you can see, like at the knee, this is not a very smooth transition. That's because the settings that I chose, I told it to be that way. And painting the weights is what we call, that's what we call it when we're editing this, because we're very literally painting a grayscale image on the surface of the mesh in order to get this to look nice. So that's what we're going to cover next. And I think I'll go ahead and make that its own tutorial.